Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. We have a very diverse geographic and sector representation, so I think we are well positioned to cover this, hopefully well in 30 minutes, which is what we've got. And just a reminder for everybody in the audience that we do have a question kind of mechanism running all the time on Slido. So if you'd like to pose a question to our panelists, just enter it in with the hashtag ETS2026 tagline, and that should show up for the panelists. And we can work those in as and when in our half hour. So let's start this off. We were framing this as a sense of trying to get an idea of how investors are approaching, again, this volatile investing landscape that we find ourselves in, and how we'd like to start off by getting all of your perspective, how investors are leaning in towards looking for those more resilient, proven returns in familiar technologies, let's say, versus taking kind of a bigger leap and chasing innovation in emerging tech. So let's perhaps start there if we can. And I'm going to send it all the way to the other side to Lauren, because I think I know how you're going to answer this one. But where do you fall on that balance?
Thank you for the question, and it's wonderful to be here. You think you know how I'm going to answer it because it's sort of by definition, Lowercarbon is a venture capital fund. And so we are, of course, always looking around the corner for what is the next thing that is going to really take off in the market. And we are exclusively focused on the not so exclusive set of sectors that are needed to decarbonize. And so that really offers a significant diversity of types of technologies in different sectors across energy, industrial materials, chemicals, critical minerals, in resilience, all these different areas that we are looking at what is poised to inflect and displace conventional alternatives. That is the thing that excites us. Now, the interesting thing where those things start to intersect is that a lot of our investments, therefore, are in hard tech industries. And so eventually they do have to become sort of insofar as they are going to be building lots of infrastructure across the world, they do have to eventually look like that proven, boring tech that large conventional dollars, institutional dollars can come in and support the infrastructure build out that our venture dollars are going to fuel early on.
That is a great opportunity maybe to just swing right around to the other side of this, institutional investors and how they're approaching this. So Raquel, where do you fall on this balance? How do you approach that question?
I think there is two sides of the coin. I mean, there is conviction that proven decarbonization levels are critical to go to the next state. And we see a lot of investors really investing on the efficiency, electrification, really the areas where you have really strong return on investment, and the capitals are 1 to 3 years, while we see other investors that they are going to or reviewing new emerging tech. And for me, it's always about divesting risk and really focus on the value that you can have by now and on a future perspective review. One of the main topics that I see is that many people, some years ago, it was, what about energy transition? When is going to happen? Energy transition is already here. And if we see last year, it was 2.3 trillion investment, for example, in energy decarbonization technologies. And we have also seen that renewables last year, the last 2 years consecutive, have been able to surpass fossil fuels. So one of the important things is that by now, technology is here, 80% of the technology is here, and companies are able to decarbonize, but we need to make some changes because with the inclusion of renewables, data centers, grids are not ready, and we need more investment on grids. We need to automatize the grids, and we need to go to the next levels, not to have challenges in the future. Mm-hmm. So we are on an inflection point to make things properly because we are on a transition phase. And if you ask, the biggest return are really on the mature technologies that are here, but meanwhile you need to review also new technologies coming.
Minesh, let's move to you on the same question. Where do you fall on that perspective? Resilient proven returns, big jumps.
Yeah, so the Renewables Infrastructure Group is a London-listed investment company. As a result, our investors are very much after total returns anchored in resilient income. So that puts us right at the lower end of the equity risk spectrum. So that means we invest in kind of the more proven technologies, wind, solar, batteries. And then to drive total returns, where are we leaning into? It's very much batteries. So we have a greenfield battery pipeline in the UK, co-location of batteries in Spain, and repowering. So even within kind of the wind space, given some of the challenges around development timelines, cost, we're actually focusing on repowerings. So last year we decommissioned our very first onshore wind farm in the south of France, and the turbines kind of are new turbines arriving on site, and we'll build that site again this year. So, our remit is Europe. So the more stable end of the policy framework, our technologies, wind, solar, batteries, more stable end of that. And then we look to drive returns with investments within that space. And then what can you do with the assets you have? So we're very active in signing corporate power purchase arrangements at the moment. We signed one with Virgin Media last year. That's very much to improve our revenue line. And then on the operational side, we work with outfits that work in the Formula One industry to bring aerodynamics from motorsport to wind turbines to try and get more out of the assets we own. So even the boring can be exciting.
Yeah. When the boring fits into Formula One, you know you're onto something. That's really interesting and raises a really good point around not just efficiency of capital, but energy efficiency that I think we can come back to for sure in a moment. But first, maybe let's just move then to Roberta and how you kind of view that investment perspective.
Yeah, so we have, I come from the World Meteorological Organization, which is a UN specialized agency for weather, water, and climate. We have been collecting for the last 150 years all the data, the variables that are the basis for our assessment of the changing climate. And what we can see from our analysis, and we publish every year a report on the state of the climate, that really the climate is accelerating. We have been, the last 10 years were the warmest year on record. The last 3 years were the warmest year on record. And 2024 was not only the warmest year on record, but also the first year that we had an increment of more than 1.5 degrees Celsius with we compared to the baseline of the pre-industrial level. So we have this massive temperature which is now absorbed by the ocean, and they expand, they impact the sea level rise. We have melting of glaciers that also impact the sea level rise, and we have also these oceans very warm that change the wind pattern and also exacerbate most of the extreme events. So this is the new baseline of climate, and this is changing rapidly. And I think when we talk about investment in new or old or new infrastructure or technologies, we have to think about how this is going to impact in the infrastructure and also in the strategy in the future. Because our hydropower, for example, has been built on a regular and predictable snow melt. Demand also has been thought about in the seasonality, which is normal and predictable. But now we have these big changes. And because we have these big changes, we need to think that the data that we are going to use for risk assessment or for new investment has to be forward-looking rather than looking backward. So we don't construct our risk matrix looking at the past, but we have to start to look at the future. And this is what also WMO is pushing, and is producing data and products that would really support this new infrastructure and the resilience of the energy, of the future energy system.
Yeah, absolutely. Another really interesting point, which I'm keen to come back to in a moment. But first, Phoebe, can you give us your perspective too, where you fall on that investment?
Absolutely. So I'll give some context, right? So I think all the hyperscalers are now rushing into building more data center. And then if you look at all the large data centers, we're not looking at like a megawatt hour addition. It's more like in the zip code of gigawatt. So that has definitely like a give pressure on the energy and the power that we need to use. So I would say like we are looking at a full spectrum of the technology innovations, so like ranging from what Minesh has mentioned, kind of the boring, non-boring, like a more traditional low risk technology, like the infrastructure investment. But in addition to that, obviously new technologies that get you into the horizon 3 type of innovations, be it like SMR in the fission nuclear side, which is like one of the largest investment that we have done last year in the zip code of like $700 million, all the way to other technologies in the food and agriculture, mobility, etc. Like those are more frontier technology that we're still looking at and invest in. So that would be kind of fall more towards the lower carbon allowance spectrum. So I would say because of the problem or the requirement is so acute, so we're definitely looking at a full spectrum of investment, and that also built into our portfolio construction.
Really interesting. Thank you. And I think what I'm hearing from most, if not all of you, is that it's a diversification game, essentially, that if you're going to be successful in all of us in pursuing this climate transition, it needs to be everything on all fronts at once. Let's come, because I'm curious to go back to the point that you mentioned, Roberta, about the measurement. Basically, we are without a doubt living in at least what feels to us like the most uncertain time. We've got dramatic policy uncertainty, the US diverging more from Europe in terms of its own targets for the climate transition and how it applies regulations domestically. Europe has its own kind of shifting policy measures as well. Interest rates and borrowing costs also particularly volatile. We've seen policy rates by central banks, major central banks across kind of the Western world, if you will, coming down steadily, but long-term borrowing costs staring very high. That's kind of feeding into, there's that risk premium staying that. And then you mentioned another point, which I hadn't factored in, which is the uncertainty and volatility around what targets we're even measuring. So keen to get your perspective, Minesh, as well, from the infrastructure side of things. So are we using the right climate assumptions now to factor in our judgments around kind of climate forward infrastructure or greater efficiency? Or is there another change to come as we start to factor in kind of the new climate specifics in 5 years, 10 years, changes in temperature, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, look, if we look at the IPCC projections, then the changes are not necessarily over the 5-10 year horizon. They're more out 20, 30 years. I think the challenge is knowing what direction it's going in. I mean, even if we just look at kind of weather over Europe this past year, if we go back 12 months ago, we had one of the stillest half years over the UK that we've had in a very long time. Suddenly this first couple of months of the year, we've had a lot of wind, a lot of rain. Meanwhile, we've had a high pressure system that's been stubbornly sitting over Sweden. So for us, it's about being diversified across the countries, not just from a weather perspective, then a policy perspective as well, and the technologies. I think on your policy point, I mean, look, there's been quite a lot of flux, but I think the one thing that has been true wherever you sit on the political spectrum is the energy transition needs to happen. I mean, for some people, it's for reasons of energy security, which just continually be brought into the spotlight. And for others, it remains decarbonization. I mean, the reason I talk about corporate power purchase agreements is we still see corporates valuing low carbon, affordable power, and renewables can provide that. But yeah, when we're talking to government, it's very much leaning into the kind of energy security piece. at the moment and affordable bills. And whilst it's been kind of an uncertain policy, in the UK, we've just seen the government put out a call for evidence in relation to corporate power purchase agreements in December. That closes next week. We'll be submitting into that and saying, okay, look, here's an opportunity for you to take the future cost, at least, of the energy transition off government balance sheet, off domestic bills, and move it to corporates who actually want to buy it, rather than potentially facing the pushback from the general public. So I think that's good. We've just seen the bill go through, or we're seeing it go through in France, where the focus is recognizing some of the pushback on renewables locally. The focus is now on repowering and making sure at least the installed capacity, which is in communities that have come to accept that they have renewables projects there, at least making sure that remains as those assets age, even if kind of new installation is more challenging. So look, there are headwinds, but I think there's also reasons to be optimistic on the policy side as well.
That's great. Who else is optimistic about policy? This is something that I'm very encouraged to hear. Lauren, do you have thoughts about this?
I mean, optimistic about policy. I sometimes, but I don't know that, and this is coming from someone who spent 20 years in the public sector for most of my career before coming to Lowercarbon. And so it hurts a little to say, I'm not sure how much policy matters, which is not true across the board. But at the moment, let's say, I think the world, Europe, the US, states in the US, across really every continent across the entire globe, have done relatively well putting in some necessary policy signals. And what we need are some signals. But I would say that coming from a US perspective, where for the last 2 decades, we have seen policy fluctuations as like the one thing you can count on is kind of like the policy chaos in a way. I think we're at a point now where actually, thanks to so much pre-existing policy signals, technology is inflecting, and especially certainly in some of the early investments that are now kind of straight up the fairway for you on the wind and solar side. But also when we think about all the reasons to do decarbonization that you were saying in supply chain, security, in energy security, there are many, many reasons that are pushing us. Cost savings, just generally using more efficient processes, moving to electrochemical processes over, being governed by inherently inefficient thermodynamic processes themselves. If you think about how, we're invested in a company based in Paris, Dioxycle, that is producing ethylene plastics, the key formulation for plastics, not from petroleum, but from off of an electrochemical process through an electrolyzer. And that is significantly more efficient. If you look at the opportunities in the energy supply chain, one would have thought that geothermal is one of the kind of older industries that, we are seeing now is experiencing significant innovation, that this is not kind of that this all of a sudden is becoming very interesting and exciting for a venture investor. We work with a company called Zanskar, and they themselves are still using conventional drilling that is available today, but using AI to find the heat source in a way that we've never been able to find before, with such certainty and accuracy that it brings down the cost significantly, that we can move much more quickly. And so we see those opportunities for inflection. That is the exciting thing that I think the history of policy has brought us to this point. But really, it is now this, I think, really exciting moment of corporates coming to the table with ambitious and much needed, not necessarily ambition because of climate, but then often ambition because of climate, but ambition in their own growth, that we just need the faster, better, cheaper option to come online. Those are the types of things that we get most excited about.
Yeah. And rightly so. You mentioned AI, and I would love to come back to that. And Phoebe, particularly, I would love to bring that to you. But before we move away from the policy space, Raquel, you had mentioned that some of the kind of strongest, like, the ROI, for example, in major projects comes from ones where there is a strong policy kind of coordinated basis across governments, if I've understood correctly, that policy backdrop is needed to give the stability to otherwise quite exciting investments. Do you feel from a European perspective that policy coordination is there, or is there an element where you think we still need to see progress?
I think we need to see some progress in some legislation, but I think one of the things which is critical right now for Europe is really energy independence.
Mm-hmm.
And if we think about electrification, what it can help us is to really not depend on energy on some other countries. And by now, it could change 70% of the fossil fuels that we are importing. And we are talking about billions here.
Mm-hmm.
Another topic that I always say is that the best energy watt is the one that is not consumed. And we have energy efficiency that can really happen. And in Europe, for example, if we think about the industrial process, by now only 4% of the industrial process are electrified. So there is already, we have the legislation to make it happen. The European Union 2 months ago launched different incentives for electrification for some of the segments which are much more difficult to electrify.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the technology, we have the weapons to make it happen. What is true is that, for example, what we need is legislation for flexibility. We have been in a period of time where by now there is a change. We are going more to distributed energy resources with solar, with storage. And what we need is that the market adapts to the signals, to the prices for energy, and there has to be a market for flexibility. So there is still and Europe, for example, needs to define the electricity market design by now. There is still room to improvement, but I think by now we have the opportunity with electrification, efficiency, storage, digital, and artificial intelligence is going to be critical so that the grids are flexible, for example, to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that is essentially a very encouraging development. Phoebe, what's your take on this? I mean, there's an idea, of course, that AI has been driving, well, not just an idea, a reality that it's driving huge energy demand. And we're still in effectively the early to mid stages of seeing where that goes. But it's really, again, encouraging, I hope, to see how AI will perhaps on the other side of that coin accelerate the climate transition and make a lot of these interesting kind of big punt techs something that is ultimately right up the fairway. So how are you seeing that AI fold into the climate transition?
Yeah, so I think everyone probably already know, as I mentioned before, right, there's a huge demand on the energy side because of the data center. But I also want to kind of switch the conversation to the other side where like how AI can make the energy efficiency and the whole like energy transition more reality than before. So from our perspective, like we have invested like $8 billion in Anthropic, one of the upcoming AI company, probably one of the hottest now in the market. And then most recently, we also did the $50 billion investment in OpenAI. So from the AI application side, I definitely see that has been blossoming across all the departments within my company. And then I also sat on a few other boards, and that's the same over there. So if you're thinking about how AI can revolutionize the whole energy transition, there are multiple sides, right? One is what Laura has actually just mentioned, like how you can actually using AI in the more traditional setting, like whether it's getting information from the geological area or being more efficient and identify sources and then the whole production process. But I think there is another side of it where when you have a workforce that is inherently more efficient with the power of agents and power of general AI, then technically you would have a more efficient workforce, you would have more efficient operations. So that would inherently reduce your carbon emissions emissions, like through your scope 2, scope 3. So, and then I'm actually seeing a lot of technologies, especially like not only our existing portfolio, but also like the upcoming sustainability and energy transition companies, that they are using AI in a different way, especially like now with physical AI being like up in front, right? So you're not only using the algorithm, but you're also looking at robotics and that being able to be deployed in the hardest and most difficult area. And I think that's going to be like super interesting and fascinating to see in the coming decade, where the whole like sustainability and energy transition is going to move over with the support of general AI and physical AI.
Yeah, exciting. Would anybody else like to come in on where you're seeing this start to impact kind of on the grid infrastructure?
Yeah, no, and I just want to add to what was already said by Phoebe, because it is also in the climate and in the weather space, AI is going to help a lot to optimize the mix of the different sources and clean sources, wind, solar, hydro, and other biofuel, and so it's going to optimize and also helping to reduce increase the affordability of energy. We, for example, in the WMO are using and are pushing for the AI also for forecast, because it actually improves the forecast medium term and long term as well, and also democratize the forecast, because it's at the moment is more based on big centers and big computer in the global north. But if we push for AI, this is also going to be an opportunity for developing countries to develop their own products and their own forecasts, and also analyzing extreme events, which is extremely important for infrastructure as well. But in any case, we still need and it's important to have that backbone of observations that WMO has been coordinating since 150 years ago, and this has to be also, I would say, part of any investment in transition, in energy transition, and in climate transition, to really help to maintain this network of observation, which is feeding all the models, and especially will feed very successful the AI model for managing better the clean energy and the transition.
Yeah, interesting.
And I would agree with that. I think artificial intelligence is a catalyst by now for the energy transition. And if we think, sometimes some people say, okay, but data centers need a lot of energy. I think what we need to review is, okay, artificial intelligence needs computing needs energy, and what we really need is intelligence on how to use the energy. So for me, we are seeing by now with our corporate customers a lot of different initiatives which you can use, for example, digital twins for assets maintenance and to really reduce downtime. We are seeing a lot of artificial intelligence for our customers on scope 3 and where you have the data, because sometimes also you need to make some estimations. We are reviewing in our supply business the price forecasting for the scenario analysis of decarbonization. So I think what we need to understand is artificial intelligence is here to support the decarbonization. It can really help on an efficiency perspective, and we need to use it on the proper way. And for example, we just developed a digital artificial intelligence native tool, and when we build this for our customers, what we really review is how we are going to be using. And you need to review what we call frugal artificial intelligence. Is you really need to understand where you use artificial intelligence for which parameters, that you also support data centers with renewable on the back, that it's really neutral in emissions, and that there is a governance in place. So it's critical that we are able to use artificial intelligence properly, but it's going to be a big catalyst for me for the decarbonization.
Yeah.
and for
Effectively, like a return on investment on the
Yep.
use of AI, rationalizing. I like the idea of a frugal AI policy. That's good. Minesh, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, only to say, look, where in the AI space we have conviction at the moment is the application to help our plants perform better and to help humans do their job better. So, for example, using drones to inspect wind turbines and then using machine learning to identify faults that the human eye can't see. And so you're kind of finding issues earlier, but also from a health and safety perspective, it's a massive win. I think where we have a bit more caution, when we want to sign corporate power purchase agreements, we often want them to go out 10 years or so. I think in the AI, like with any nascent sector, we've had this problem with green hydrogen as well, is what conviction do you have in the business model of your offtake that they're not going to be superseded over 10 years and that you're going to continue to have a customer? Because, the way the power price forecasts are is that supposedly power prices are going to come down over time. That means a value transfer from us to our customer in the early years and a value transfer back to us. But if you have no conviction that your customer is necessarily going to be there beyond 3 to 5 years, because the pace of the sector they're in might just overtake them, then I think you're a little wary then.
Yeah, and fair enough. I'm afraid this is probably going to be our last comment, but Lauren, and then
Sure,
we'll wrap up a
AI
little bit.
question. Just listening to everyone speaking here about sort of the benefits, of AI and seeing how that's playing out, maybe just giving a couple examples of seeing how that's playing out in the marketplace for us. On the hard tech side, being able to deploy AI tools to hasten the pace of iteration, of experimentation, particularly when it comes to something like fusion technologies. And we are deeply invested in commercial fusion. So using, being able to deploy AI tools to manage those kinds of analyses and tests and models is rapidly juicing the rate of development towards solutions and being able to build first-of-a-kind plants. On another area, since we mentioned sort of the Earth observation and data side, hugely important. We are also deeply invested in the resilience space, and frankly, the world falling apart is great for people who are investing in the world falling apart and trying to stop the world from falling apart. And when we're trying to stop the world from falling apart, being able to utilize AI tools in the insurance industry, for example, new insurance companies that are running to wildfires instead of away from wildfires. This may be like a very US, maybe a very California reference, but wildfire insurance is absolutely at a breaking point in many parts of the world, and California is sort of ground zero for that, where I'm from. And being able to invest in new types of deployments such that we can better analyze risk and better facilitate homeowner mitigation to reduce their individual risk or community scale risk so that we can get homes insured again and people can affordably live. I mean, that is a climate issue, but the thing that is motivating people to act is very much a personal safety and economic need. That's these are the kinds of resilience companies that de facto, taking the opportunity to come in and solve real world problems, and these real world problems being brought on by climate are only growing. So our understanding of Earth, of processes, of how all these different issues interact between, fire and wind and combustibles and all of these things is vital to human health and safety.
Yeah. This has been so interesting, and I think we could go for another couple of hours. I would certainly like to very much. But either way, I've come away from this short time feeling pretty optimistic and glad to have all of you working on these very important questions. So much uncertainty, but some of that including around the tech used to analyze what's happening, could be a source of big advances moving forward. So thank you very much. And please, everyone, join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their insights today.